This is Meet the Filmmakers, a partnership of CBC and the Directors Guild of Canada in Ontario. My guest today is Andrew Cividino, the film and television writer, director, producer, who just added a shiny new prize to his already pretty full trophy case, the Emmy Award for Best Directing of a Comedy, which he shares with Dan Levy. Huge congratulations, Andrew, and welcome. Thanks a lot for
Thank you.
being
Thank you
here
very
with
much,
us.
and thanks for having me.
Before we dive in, here's a little background on you. Andrew was born in Dundas, Ontario, and studied filmmaking at Ryerson University. That's where you met Dan Levy, is that right? In 2006, you won the Ontario Film Review Board Student Film Competition. You made a handful of shorts, and Telefilm included you on its Talent to Watch panel in 2011. When funding fell through for your feature debut, Sleeping Giant, you turned it into a short, which was nominated for a Canadian Screen Award, and that enabled you to remake it as a feature. It premiered in Cannes in 2015 and then played 45 festivals, something like that, right? In 29 different countries. It won major awards in Munich, Toronto, Vancouver. It received 4 Canadian Screen Award nominations and won one for Best Supporting Actor. At some point after that, Dan Levy hired you to co-direct some episodes of Schitt's Creek. You ended up directing half of the final season, and that major Emmy love followed. It was a historic sweep for anybody who doesn't already know that yet. Schitt's Creek won all 7 of the top awards, a feat no other comedy has ever accomplished, not I Love Lucy or MASH or Cheers or All in the Family. If you haven't seen season 6 yet, or if you want to watch it again, it's streaming right now on CBC Gem. So again, welcome, Andrew. I mean, it must have been a hell of a thing to be in the room that night. You were sort of broadcasting live from Casa Loma in Toronto, is that correct?
Yeah, we knew it was going to be a strange year for the Emmys because of the world that we're currently living in. And I think it was important to Dan and to everyone to find a way to sort of be together. So they sort of planned it out and found Casa Loma as the venue for it. And we all got COVID tests and self-isolated in advance so we could spend the evening together for it.
And set the scene for me. I mean, are you eating, drinking, mingling? Like, what, is everybody nervous? Are you quiet? Are you babbling?
Everyone is so nervous. And there's definitely, I mean, it was sort of surreal from the get-go. When you add this, how strange it is with COVID and not even having been in a room with many people over the last 5-6 months, whatever the time warp is, it was already just amazing to see these people who I haven't seen for a while. So I felt sort of like I was nervous going into it, but once we'd arrived and you sort of are dropped off and you walk down to the back of Casa Loma, it's a beautiful fountain and they have a lovely sort of setup. And then just seeing all those familiar faces and being able to catch up, that sort of like helped calm the nerves, I think, for all of us. I think we were sort of just happy to be in a room together. And then this night sort of went for there. We were seated for a dinner. It was tables like of two max. We actually had to uninvite half of the guests like 2 days before the event because the province changed the sort of guidelines. And so it was basically just nominees. Like that was it. There were 15 of us total.
Wow.
So
then the night begins and they start, it's just this roll of like Schitt's Creek over and over and over again. Like, what were you all feeling like? How was it between the awards? Were you all just like...
Yeah, I mean, we were overstimulated. It was like, okay, if you went to like a casino with a bunch of your friends and you were all like, we each get like $1 to pull out of the slot machine and your first friend goes and they win the jackpot and the lights are going off and the money's pouring out and you're like, that's the best thing ever. We already did it. I can't believe it. And then one person after another just kept going up and winning. And it was like, I think I can only speak for myself. I felt confident for Catherine and and Eugene and like hopeful for show, but I don't think like none of us could have anticipated how it actually went. And when it finally got to my category, I was like, I'm gonna kill our streak. This is just what a shame. I'm so sorry, everybody. And I think we kind of all felt that. It didn't feel possible that it was happening. It was like a dream.
You do hear your name, and is it even a different feeling that, like, people have described it to me as like all sound drops out, or they'd have no idea
The
what they
weird
said
thing
later.
was, the thought that crossed my head was, Jimmy Kimmel just said my name. Like, because it adds another like level of the surreal. And we were all wearing masks throughout the night, and we were told just we could take them off to eat, basically, and to like go up for the award. So you have to remember to take your mask off and then sort of wander up. And it is, I mean, I'm sure it's way more nerve-wracking to do this event in person, but there's still something strange about, there's a big projector screen that we were watching. And so in between commercial breaks and the segments and stuff, you could see like all the Zoom boxes of all the other people. So you're like, oh, that's Christina Applegate in her living room. That's like Helena Bonham Carter. That's whatever people are up to. And then when you get up there, there's like a microphone and a camera. And so it feels very like it just feels strange. It's like an empty space. You're facing away from all of the people you're with, and you're just talking into this camera. And then almost immediately there's like the flashing, wind it up. So I have no idea what I said, but
yeah. You get to say hello and goodbye, and that's about it. So in the room, were you all aware that this was historic? That like the top 7, for people who might not know, you know, the 4 acting categories plus writing, directing, and then best comedy. So were you aware that this was like a sweep that had not yet been accomplished before?
No, I don't think any of us were thinking in those terms. I think we were, I don't think you, I mean, who's record checking on their, like in advance and be like, guys, if we win them all, we're going to break some records. I think you can't afford to even think like that, because I think that like you just set yourself up for disappointment. So I think everybody was just hopeful that we'd win a couple, and then just flabbergasted and blown away at the continual roll of the whole thing. I think we were all, by the end of it, we didn't even, everyone's like, you must have stayed up all night partying. But I think by like midnight, 12:30, we were all like, I think I gotta go home now. Like, we were just like, we had a fun over, we were overdone.
A fun over is very good. Did you end up watching the rest of the show, or were you all just too like crazy to watch the rest?
They cut the feed for us because we had to go and do press. So it's sort of like, and they had a schedule, and it was you the comedy portion will be over by X time, and then you will go, if there are, for the win, like those who win, there will be sort of a press thing set up.
You must have been glad that comedy was first.
Yes, it would have been, I think, that much harder to watch half the show in anticipation. Already the heart rate was, maxing out. So
super high.
When it's time to lay down your weary head, you'll find comfort and safety at the partially renovated Rosebud Motel. And don't forget to say hello to your handsome proprietor, Mr. Jonathan Rose.
Thank you for having us.
John, no.
I know this is like a big question. You've probably been asked it a lot, but do you have a sense of why the show caught fire like that? Why do you think people just, because it was this extraordinary thing where every year it was more and more and more beloved. And because you guys went out season 6 on such a high, there was not that kind of like wane. It wasn't like, oh, everybody loves season 5 best, but then we did season 6 to wrap it up. Like, you just were like the whole time. Do you have a sense of what was catching people?
I think it was a confluence of things. I think part of it was the show always had a certain quality that was then found a broader audience when it was like, I think landing on Netflix helped to broaden the sort of audience that the show had access to. I think the show shifted like after maybe a season or something from its conceit into, we're growing with these characters and growing on this journey with them. And I think it's a show that is about sort of like, it's rooted in inclusivity and love, and presents a world that it was without sort of as the malice that we sort of maybe all are seeing in our own lives, and shows sort of like what can be possible in that way, while still being grounded in like a lot of truth for these characters. And I think this is one of the first times also to see the way that a same-sex relationship was portrayed between David and Patrick, where the only thing exceptional about it was how unexceptional. It's just a beautiful story of two people falling in love, and that's it. There's no asterisks. There's no anything. And I think that however simple an idea, was something that was really important to Dan, and that I think was in a way kind of revolutionary in terms of that sort of depiction on television.
I once dated someone who left me for a stuffed animal. I'm not having my big day, our big day, compromised because Alexis wanted to chill in a tankini for 6 months.
Who's excited, huh?
I've always loved shows where they believe that people behaving well can be as dramatic as people behaving badly. So falling in love it doesn't have to lead to tragedy, or, they don't have to suffer. It was just like they fell in love and they got to fall in love. And I just loved that about the show. I saw that billboard. There was a billboard of the kiss at the corner of Yonge and Davenport. And I actually stopped my car and took a picture of it, because it was just like, oh my God, it's so great that it's just out there like every other billboard.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. So when you and Dan met back in school, what did you respond to in each other? What do you think you saw in each other back then?
I think each other's test answers while we were sitting next to each other was the first thing we saw. No, Dan had transferred into Ryerson while I was there, and I couldn't tell you, like a lot of friendships, I couldn't tell you sort of exactly how it started, but we were friends while I was there, and then, and worked on a few shorts together. He was doing costume, and I was ADing, and we were, it was a long time ago, but then he sort of left to do, he got a job at MTV, and he left to do that, and I went to do my own thing, and it was a number of years. It was a number of years before we sort of were in touch again, and then we had one of those friendships that it exists but is I guess dormant, you could say. And then we'd seen each other a couple of times, and then I made Sleeping Giant, and he saw the film, and we were out for lunch in New York, I guess that winter or whatever, and he just said that they were looking to do a Christmas episode of the show, and he wanted to do something a bit more cinematic with it, and asked if I would come and do that with him. And so I jumped at that opportunity, and that sort of rekindled the friendship, because we were spending all of our time together, and was a really wonderful experience of getting to work on the show and with all of them. So I've sort of hung around on the show sort of since then. I did the cabaret episode the following year, and then the sort of, the bulk of the last season. Right.
So, okay. I know it's one thing to know Dan and be friends with Dan, but you walk onto the set day one. It's the final episode of season 4. Is that right?
Yes. Yeah.
And it's Catherine O'Hara and Eugene Levy. Who were they to you?
I was cool as a cucumber.
So were they a big deal to you, obviously?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, I grew up watching SCTV, and Home Alone and American Pie and Best in Show, and so I was very familiar with their work, and I was definitely, and working in episodic is very different than working in independent feature territory. The way the days are structured, the way sets run, the way crew's organized, it's a different beast altogether. And I'd always done really location work, because that's what you really mostly do when you're working, especially in the lower budget territory. So walking on day one into the studio, and you sort of block out your first scene, and then you're ready to go, and then they lock it up and they ring the bell, and what's that bell? I didn't just trying to act like everything's normal. So that it was definitely it was daunting, but at the same time, it was a great opportunity to sort of learn quickly on the floor as well as I could. And the fundamentals are, at the end of the day, the same. And so I was, I actually felt the most comfortable in that episode when there's a bigger setup sort of where we have a big Steadicam oneer going through a mansion in sort of Johnny Rose's memory to open the episode. For me, that was a 1 camera setup. There wasn't a protocol on the show of how to do things, because on episodic, you're stepping into a world and a process that has existed on this show already, and you're trying to be additive without stepping on toes.
Right.
But on those kind of days, I actually felt the most comfortable because there was no standard process. So it gets to sort of lean on you more, and you can just sort of step in and say, this is what we're going to do and how we're going to do it. And,
right.
and being able to do that with Dan, with me, that was a lot of fun. Like I really enjoyed those days where we got to sort of stretch our legs a bit and take on the bigger stuff.
It's funny how that stuff works on you unconsciously. Like I remember watching that episode, and they're having one kind of Christmas in the motel in present day, and then Johnny Rose is flashing back to the sort of grand Christmases they used to have. And in the beginning, it all looks like it's the most fun party in the world, and there's 1,000 trillion Christmas lights and unbelievable decorations and pianos and people and champagne. And then, of course, at the end of it, you find out that that there was no heart there, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I do remember thinking like, this looks different or this feels different. And I do think that there is that kind of injection of what you're talking about, of cinema into the television show at that point. And do you think that carried on then in the show for the next couple of seasons?
I think that the show has its own intentional language that it stayed honest to, and then picked its moments to sort of elevate it for the right moments. And I was lucky to direct some of those moments, and there are other directors who directed others. I think of the Simply the Best song, like that was a beautiful moment. Both parts of that sort of romantic beat between the two of them. And those were shot with a little bit more elevated language. Like if you go back and look, just the way the camera's moving and everything, it isn't in our sort of our standard language. So simpler things like that, or bigger things like Cabaret or The Wedding or whatever. Those are, although I'd say The Wedding actually, we did some Steadicam, but I'd say we tried to keep it in the language of the show more so, sort of being conscious of making the last episode feel like an episode of the show.
Is it me, or do they look like husband and wife? Kind of.
I definitely didn't come in and like change the language of the show. It was more just fitting in to the right moments and finding the opportunities where it made a lot of sense to do that. Especially the Christmas episode is like a perfect example. You want to create a difference between their past life and their present one. So using the language you use visually and tonally can help to contribute to that.
Yeah, I said like it worked on me sort of unconsciously almost, because I wasn't super aware. It wasn't like it jumped out that it was different. So you did it quite seamlessly. But then I think about the Cabaret episode. So again, it's the final episode of the following season, the 5th season. And Moira Rose has been producing this local version of Cabaret, and now we're going to get to see it. So you arrive, and now you're directing a musical, Andrew, and a musical that, Bob Fosse made. So what did that feel like?
I mean, I was stoked. And Dan has these ideas like well before they're written. And he's like, okay, so next year we're going to do Cabaret. I'm like, okay. And then you have some time to think about it and to watch Bob Fosse's version and to watch every recording on Broadway that exists on YouTube, and to go to the Lower Ossington Theater and watch it, and to do as much research as you can to see how the show is done. That was really exciting for me to be able to work like in sort of musical theater in that space. And I think one of the most fun parts was as we were doing the rehearsals with the actors in the show, it felt like everyone was rehearsing for a musical. Like it felt like, because we were doing it all on one day, right? It's like, there's a show, we have to be ready. The numbers need to be ready for the show. And watching all the departments come together, the construction department for that, the set, and like the whole art department there, and the choreography, and watching like my friends at this point with like Noah and Annie and Sarah and Emily all sort of crushing and like working so hard and doing the numbers. It was a ton of fun. And then, but it did all boil down to, we had one day for the backstage stuff and one day for the actual, all the musical numbers. And that was a very intense day for sure, to get all of that in and try to find a way, because you also can only run it so many times before everybody drops dead. It's a real performance, and it's very athletic, and they're all singing live. So it was fun.
Wow. So, okay, so then you come in for season 6, and by this point, the show is like a bona fide hit, and they're doing the live shows, and people are crying when they see them, and Moira has become the latest drag icon, and parents are writing letters thanking the show for helping their kids come out. Like, it's a phenomenon. Can you feel that on the set? Is there a way of keeping the outside world out, or did you welcome it in?
I think there's a sense of, every year going out to like Goodwood or wherever we'd shoot, the number of fans would grow from like 0 to in the last season, every day we were out there would be, like a dozen people or more who had made the trek to out there just to see if we were shooting and what was going on, or out at the actual hotel. People would stop by, even on our location scout in the middle of spring, people stopping and going, they're just there to look at it's not, I can tell you, I'll spare you the trip. It's not much to look at when we're not shooting there. So I think we were aware of that. And for the first time in the last season, I know, because there was an attempt to sort of preserve some of the storyline stuff, we had to sort of try to put up privacy barriers and things while we were filming so stuff wouldn't get leaked. And that was a difference. But otherwise, I think the sort of internal pressure of trying to continue to grow the show in scope and execution and to deliver to that standard existed before there were fans, and I don't think changed that much. And I think we didn't get our first Emmy nomination until after we'd wrapped the final season. And in a way, I feel very fortunate that I think it would be scarier to go back if there was another season. Because then that pressure would be there, right, in a way that we were able to sort of avoid. I think we were able to exist in a perfect spot of knowing that there were people out there who really cared about what we were doing, and yet not feel the intensity of pressure that we might feel if we were still going.
Right. I can tell you that I have been there. There's that little sandwich shop on the corner.
Great little bakery.
While I sat there eating my sandwich, I saw 3 carloads of people get out and take pictures of the, like, now wrapped, not any remotely thing looking like the apothecary anymore.
Yes.
Or and people were still taking pictures. So I think it's going to remain a destination. So tell me about a day on the set. Like, are they improvising? Is it all quite locked down? Are you laughing? Are you just trying to get through it?
I think whatever, like, you leaving on your own. I never stay on set. If there's one imperative in TV is always like making your days. So you're aware of the clock every single day. It's just the nature of it. We also like factually, one episode of Miss Maisel costs more than our entire season, right? So, so more than 14 episodes of our show. So that creates pressure, like, on resources and on time that exists, and that's sort of something that is at play. So you get in, you do your blocking first thing in the morning at crew call, and at that point there's a little bit of figuring things out. I think we leave room we do a private blocking first, so it's just the cast and the director, and it leaves a little bit of room for the actors to sort of play a bit and say and tweak lines and do their thing. And then we try to get it up on its feet with the crew, with the general blocking, like a crew blocking. Then everyone gets their makeup done, and we sort of just like plan our shots and get everything ready. So, and hopefully you're all ready at the same time. And they come back and we sort of get into the scene. And there's definitely, like, there are moments, especially at the end of scenes, where the actors, you never cut too quickly on that show, because they're such a talented group of people who can be really surprising. And I think sometimes, even whether it's in the blocking or while you're shooting, I think there are people like Catherine who definitely, whether it's spontaneous or whether they had kind of thought of it and they're like, I'm just going to hold on to this little gem, and then they bring it out in the moment, and it's just like it's unbelievable. There are definitely moments where you're trying not to laugh behind the camera and ruin things. Especially, I like working close to the actors, so there's a video village with the big monitors, and I'll often be closer to set with smaller monitors for communication. But then you have to be really careful, because if you laugh, you're going to ruin the take, which a few times I definitely was stuffing my fist in my mouth practically.
So how does it work with co-directing? You sort of split season 6 mainly with Jordan Canning and a couple of the directors. What does co-directing do for you? Why do you like it, and how does it work?
I think co-directing is, I mean, it probably depends a lot on the context. And in a show like this, where Dan is the showrunner, it's a pretty seamless thing. I think Dan is across, like, the show really is his baby, and he's across all of it, and he has like had a vision for what he wanted it to be. So co-directing with him wasn't that different than directing on my own in a way. He's across everything, and yet there's a level of trust that exists. He acts in a lot of scenes, obviously, too, so he can't actually physically be present, but he's also across 13 other episodes than the one you're co-directing. So they're co-directing what is, I think, some days we were afforded the chance to be in the chair together, which was really, really nice, and to just sort of discuss and watch, and I don't know, take turns calling action and cut. Like, there's no like real methodology there. And then on other days where he's pulled in a million other directions, it's the meetings that we have before to discuss everything, and then just trusting that I'm going to execute on those. But I'd say that that's true of directing solo as well. There's an understanding of what you're trying to achieve, and then the trust to go out and get it done. But that's definitely the difference about working in episodic versus on your own film or something. It's like there's another level of thinking, which is these are my instincts, and then are these instincts in line with like the showrunner's vision, and like making sure that you're doing your best to tell their show, because it's their vision.
Right. So does that change you as a director? Because I mean, I think everybody thinks of, certainly in cinema, that the director is this auteur who calls all the shots, and then in television, it's really more about the showrunner and the writer. So you're sort of, as you say, having to create their vision. Does it change the way then you direct your own stuff? Like, are you thinking more like, less the captain, more the team, or like, does it affect your eye, your way of thinking?
I think the biggest sort of thing that would change for me going forward is certainly like I can go into like page churning machine now. Like, I know how to block a scene really efficiently for shooting, the things you need to learn to cover a scene for television, just like the way people are going to move in a room. If somebody wants to go over there, suddenly that's not going to work, because we're going to have to open up two other setups minimum that we're going to have to do. And if we can just, so like there's an efficiency that I think you learn while doing that. But in terms of the sort of like vision side, I think it's more just understanding that they are two different things, and understanding what you can bring with as little ego as possible to both situations, which is, it's not that you don't have instincts and make decisions. You're making decisions all day long when you're working in episodic, but what you're trying to do is make decisions that are in tune with the objective of the show, which is what everybody's doing on every show if they're doing their job. Kind of, it's sort of putting themselves aside and thinking what's best for the show. And that's true. It's easy when it's your own vision, because of course you're pursuing your own project, but that's what every crew member and every director in episodic or everything should be doing too. It's just asking themselves that question, all day long.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Do you find you want to focus on more television than film, or do you want to always be able to go back and forth?
I really want to be always able to go back and forth. I think that they're so different and can be really rewarding in their own ways. And I think that the line between the two is really blurring right now in an exciting way. So I think I want to be in that space where I think a lot of fun stuff's happening in the limited series space now. shorter form stories, and formats kind of blowing up right now as a genre a little bit. And I think that those spaces in between are really exciting. So I plan to be doing both and some things in between.
Yeah, limited series is kind of the perfect marriage, isn't it? It's like a, you know, like a long movie or where you get to really do something cinematic. So let's go back then to the beginning of your career. Let's go all the way back, actually. What kind of a kid were you? What interested you? And then how did you first think about going into kind of writing, directing?
Yeah, what kind of a kid was I? I was one of three boys, and we were definitely like a tornado traveling around, wreaking havoc. And I think I first got into film. I mean, it was grade 11, believe it or not. It was like pretty late as far as like that sort of goes. I didn't watch a ton of movies growing up. I came to that sort of through the inverse. In grade 11, my dad got a mini DV camcorder for the family for Christmas. And I just started making movies with my friends, and I was already sort of into computers, so editing and figuring that side out was really easy, and the post side, and doing all my own sound design and score and figuring it all out. And it seemed like a merger of all these things that I loved as separate sort of mediums. And I was like science track. I thought I was going to try to pursue medicine. And but then when it came time to apply to university, I realized like all I do with my spare time is make these movies. I stay up overnight, like editing them. I'm obsessed. This is what I love to do. And some people make a living doing it, so why not me? And I was just naive enough to sort of have that thought and to pursue it. So I think that's the fortunate thing about being young and naive, is like you don't know that it can actually then really be quite hard as you're getting into it. But that was the way in for me.
Yeah, if somebody is doing it, I think that's completely fair. Were you a genre filmmaker? Like what kind of movies were those early movies that you were making with your friends?
Oh God, it was a totally mixed bag, because I mean, some of them were, I would convince teachers to let me turn an essay into, a short film, or I did drama, but instead of doing plays, I would do short films, and I was fortunate that my teachers would let me do that. Some of it, I mean, I was like 15, 16 years old. So some of it was like just like dumb, like fantasy, or like whatever stuff, like, people running around in like army fatigues and like doing like ninja fights and stuff. Like I wouldn't say that there are no masterpieces on the cutting room floor or anything, but it was a great, it was a great sort of learning experience. And I do actually look back fondly because I was doing it at the time with pure passion, no clue, and no sort of expectation or stress around it. Like there was no weight on my shoulders. I was just doing it because I loved it. And I think as your career goes on, like your livelihood, your life depends on what you're doing. So it's, you try to tune out the pressure, but it's there obviously in a way. So I look back very fondly on the sort of pure creativity of that time, however terrible the content was.
Pure pressure plus no clue doesn't often work out in a career, but I love that it can on a movie. That's fantastic. Were there directors that sort of set you on fire? Were there people who you then, once you started to become aware of cinema and television, were there like inspirations?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, because it's like a specific period of time, obviously, that like for me, Darren Aronofsky, when I was about to go to film school, like I watched Requiem for a Dream, and although I don't have the same affection for that movie I once did, it's sort of what he did with montage and sound and visually blew my mind in terms of what a visceral experience watching that movie could be. But then, as I came around from making things to wanting to watch things, then you get into Kubrick, and you get into like the masters, and film school was great for that. Then you're watching Fellini and Godard, and your mind is exploding at all the amazing things that people have done. And you're like, people were doing this crazy stuff 40 years ago. Like there's so much amazing stuff, like all the way back it was fun going back to Eisenstein and watching movies all the way through. And I think that really triggered, like, then I fell in love with the art and the history of cinema and all of its seemingly endless permutations. For such a young art form, it's crazy how much it's been through.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah. It's funny, you mentioned your science brain, and directors need to have so much at their disposal, right? I think that there's all kinds of things that come in from like the corners of your experience and the corners of your mind when you become a director. Were you aware of like what do you think is a sort of skill or a talent or an interest you have that you would never think would matter in directing, but it mattered to you?
That's a great question. I think there are things that can be, I think language as a director is incredibly important, and vocabulary. In the same way, like if you're, I like wine, but if I tasted it, I can be like, that tastes good. Like, I can't tell you that it's like that, oh, like a dry apricot with the minerality of a volcanic region. But if you're, if that's your world, you need to have that language, because the taste, literally or figuratively, is not enough. You need to be able to communicate about it. And so I think for me, I like a love of music was surprisingly helpful, both in terms of like being able to communicate. I sort of take for granted being able to communicate in terms of sound and music stuff from my previous experience with people, both like in terms of composers, in terms of working with sound mixers or editors. I can, I have the language to describe the thing that my ear is catching on. And then I think that also then helps you with the pacing of a scene, with the edit. There's a sense of rhythm and all those things. So I think music is something that definitely has had a positive impact on my ability as a director that I wouldn't have necessarily expected, beyond being able to say, I want the score to sound like this.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, because it's all about rhythm and pacing, and something that beyond just the words on the page. Obviously, you're adding mood. Music has a lot of mood language attached to it.
Yeah, and then I think you learn that you need to have the vocabulary for every department. Like, you need to be able to talk with your cinematographer that way. You need to be able to know the stuff, so that a bit about every department, so you can, at least, you're never going to know it as well as they know it, but you know it well enough to speak their language. Right.
So you can communicate the same vision. I mentioned at the top that Sleeping Giant's financing fell through. You'd originally intended to do it as a feature. You ended up doing it as a short. Did that end up helping, do you think? Do you think that having that like first crack at it ended up weirdly being beneficial?
Yeah, inadvertently, although I wouldn't recommend getting your film shot down 2 years in a row for anyone. But you kind of have to roll with things however they happen. And I think that did turn out for us. The original feature script for Sleeping Giant, I'd done a bunch of shorts, they played the right festivals. I thought, I like sort of linear paths that I can see. And I was like, oh, if I do these things and then I apply for funding, the next step is I will get the funding and I will make my movie. And that didn't happen. And so I had to rethink things. And I credit, people like Kaz and Matt Johnson, who were going out at the time and making their own movies and just making them. And I thought, well, I think we need to do this. After this, so when the financing fell through, we were already up there. We'd already cast the kids. And so we said, well, we'll just make a short. But the original script was basically almost like a Linklater knockoff, like a little bit Dazed and Confused-y. It was in the world. It had some similar elements to the final film, but it didn't, I don't think, have any of the honesty of it. And I think if I was given money, that I would have tried to make a capital M movie with the proper bigger crew and do all the things and sort of get caught in the trappings of it, as opposed to doing what we ultimately did. Because when we made the short film, it was, okay, well, let's at least learn something here. So we decided, why don't we just take some pages from the script? The kids can sort of learn them. We'll toss them aside, and then we'll just go around. We had a DSLR and a bed sheet basically for bounce, for light. And we made that short, but it was impressionistic. It was a completely different sort of visual style than I'd worked in before. And working with kids in that space, I realized how much more I could get out of them in terms of performance and and how important agility was going to be to making the movie. So we had a whole other year to come back, and Karen Harnish, my producer, and I sort of said, next summer, no matter what, we're going. We have our kids. We don't want to let them get too old for these roles. We're just going to make this movie. And that's what we did. And then I was able to rewrite the film around that idea and process. And then we knew going in, everybody on that crew understood we need to be agile. If we're setting up for a scene over here and the kids start going and like hopping that fence over there, we have to go film them doing that because that's the priority. And so I think the process, I learned a lot about process through that film, and the short ultimately set me up to make the feature that we did.
Yeah, because I mean, without the financing falling apart side of things, there's an argument to be made that everybody could benefit from sort of doing a distilled version as a first draft almost, right? To kind of figure out your language and figure out your, you and I spoke back in 2016 for a Globe and Mail story, and we talked about navigating the Canadian system. And it made me laugh when you said that you're a linear guy, because obviously the movie and television business laughs at anyone who thinks it's going to be linear. But you mentioned then that there wasn't like a system here in Canada, but like a whole bunch of bubbles of influence, you called it. Has that changed in the intervening years? Do you think things are better or worse?
I think that I'm hopeful for a better, but I think that like almost everything in 2020, there's a lot of turmoil and uncertainty and appropriate questioning of the structures that are sort of currently in place. So I think the sort of, at least I can only speak for the Anglo-Canadian system because that's what I work in. I definitely think it is in a bit of identity crisis and needs a bit of an overall. I think funding for films here right now is really difficult. I mean, that's not all the Canadian system. The industry at large is changing so rapidly in the last, if you look at, you can't even just say 10 years, but like 2, 3, 4 years, it's constantly turning over, and everyone's trying to keep up on how films are financed, how people are watching them. Everything is changing. Theatrical's gone, or going. Obviously streamers, like a million different things. So, but then that bubbles down to the way films are financed, who's going to pay for it, because who's going to sell it, and that all has created confusion, I think, within our system, and a bit of an identity crisis between whether to prioritize sort of the cultural export, or sort of the growth of our sort of artists in the hope that they will sort of break through, or whether we're trying to sort of mimic an American model and focus on a commercial entity, because those two things are, I think, somewhat mutually exclusive, as much as we'd like to pretend that they're not. And I certainly have my opinions. I think that we should be really focusing on supporting filmmakers to make films that are going to break through the noise floor that there is right now. There's more content being created every year now than most people could watch in a lifetime. It's just we're in a different era than we were 10, 15 years ago. And the way that films are going to break through, especially at the budget level that Canadian movies are made, and the P&A spend, the publicity spend, the only way they're going to break through, and ironically, the only way that they're going to make money, even potentially, is if they pierce through on the festival circuit. They're unique and original and daring, and they find a way to get through the din of the tens of thousands, literally, of movies that are made every single year. But I think our system right now is still, unfortunately, focused on proving that there's an economic side to the project before it's made, which I think is just a little bit inverted right now, because the kind of economic thing that you can get attracted to your project at that early stage, at this budget level, often has then an excessive amount of influence, and it's not toward making some amazing masterpiece. It's toward, how can I make sure that this DVD is going to sell in Walmart in Croatia. I don't know if they have Walmart in Croatia, but you know what I mean.
So your advice would, it's a mistake to be commercial, be audacious, do something that's more unusual rather than more, support, marketable. Yeah.
And as projects get bigger, I think you can focus more on the market element that's required. But the idea of making movies in the 1 to 1.5 million range and being we just need to see that market interest is and the metrics by which we measure sort of that success right now, I think, are like Canadian box office is like a crazy metric for success ultimately. So I think it's just, and I don't like there are a lot of stakeholders that with competing interests, and it's a very rapidly changing time. So I understand why things are the way they are, but I'm hopeful that they'll change. And I think more importantly, all the system as it is, is got a lot of catch up work to do on representation. And those changes, I think they can happen sort of hand in hand. And I think there's a big consultation process happening right now, and hopefully a lot of good will come out of that. Fingers crossed.
Yeah. I also think that there's this thing that we do in Canada where we nurture a little bit the first time filmmaker, and then that leap from first to second film or first to second project is very hard to do. Do you have any advice for people on how to navigate that?
I think going from first to second feature is definitely, was certainly a huge challenge for me. I think one thing is if you have your second film ready to go before the first one's done, that helps, because momentum comes in waves, and it's good. It's important to try to ride one wave to the next one. I think the tendency is to want to do something bigger next, because usually your first film is going to be fairly small, and you want to prove that you can do something bigger, and you want your career to grow. And I think those are good instincts, but I think it's more important to be making things. So I think it's always good to have something in your back pocket that can be sort of small and nimble. And I look at the careers of people like Delan, who has spent a decade making movies rapid fire, and I think it was really to his benefit. I think it helps if you can be making things rapidly. It helps in a number of ways. Momentum, and it also makes you a little bit of Teflon. Like, every movie doesn't need to be a masterpiece, because before somebody can criticize the last 1 year, they have to start talking about the new one, which is actually pretty great. And I think that is better. Myself and a couple of my friends have these long dormant periods between movies. They're not dormant, you're working your butt off the whole time, but I think my advice would be try to find ways to get that second film made, whether it's in the Canadian system or not, and don't be married to trying to make it work within the sort of institutions that we have, or the sort of like gatekeeper producers or whatever. I think you just have to find ways to get your movie made.
Mm-hmm. Do you know what's next for you?
Yeah, I mean, right now, because of everything with the Emmys, it is sort of a bit of a heady time. There's a lot sort of floating around. But I do know for sure right now that I'm going to be going, and I'm working on a limited series with a close friend of mine, and we're sort of writing over the fall, and I think that we'll probably be announcing something in the not too distant future, but I'm really excited for that. I think it's going to be, it was originally a feature film, and it was going to be, but I think it's expanded into something really, really great. And that'll be another sort of co-directing thing that I'm doing. Different friend, but an incredibly talented collaborator. And I'm really looking forward to that.
And you can't say anything more, the collaborator, the genre, nothing?
Oh, I don't know if I can, is the thing. So maybe I'll leave it for now. But he an American filmmaker who I really am pals with, and am looking forward to working with officially. That's okay. I guess
good to leave us with a little bit of history. And when you win an Emmy, like, does your phone start ringing? Are there people who are sort of coming at you now differently, or giving different offers? It's I
mean, it's my phone like practically melted on Emmy night, which was nice. Like, I've got, my grade 3 teacher is emailing me and stuff. Like, so definitely on that side. And then also professionally, I mean, almost comically more from the US than here, but certainly it's been like pretty off the hook in that sense too. So I have, lots of like meetings and And I think like opportunities coming out of it, which is really sort of exciting to see where that'll all go. So it feels like a really nice next step boost.
Well, much deserved. I won't keep you much longer. I would love to know if there are moments like when you close your eyes and you think back on Schitt's Creek, that final season especially, are there things you're really proud that you helped that show achieve or put out there? Like, are there moments you were so glad you got to witness live? Just tell me some of the highlights.
I mean, it was a highlight to be able to go to work with that group of people every day. In terms of actual specific episode moments, I mean, the wedding is something I am proud of. That was also shot in one day. That's a crazy day. And I really sort of like pushed for a certain process and order, and wanting to start with the coverage on this actor because I felt like I really did sort of, I was a little bit more pushy that day in terms of how things would go. And I'm really proud of how that turned out. Cabaret was special in that sense. The Crows premiere and like this last season and the trip to New York, there were some sort of big days that were really exciting to be a part of. But then the special moments, I mean, like I've made some lifelong friends out of it. And that last day being a part of, we shot the goodbyes and the final episode on our last day of shooting. And to be a part of that experience and sort of in that family of people was very, very special. It felt like that more than summer camp. It felt like a family thing. And that was really, really rewarding.
Yeah, I understand there were a lot of tears.
Yeah, well, that's why it's like, guys, I know you're feeling this for real, but we got to bring it down a bit because this is getting maudlin. It's turning into a soap opera.
The characters can't cry that much.
Yeah, exactly.
You can't cry that much. Okay, so just one last question about directing those comedy legends. Like, these are people who know inside out everything there is about what's funny. Did you as a director ever have to say like, hey, it's not, Eugene, Catherine, it's not quite happening? Or did you ever have to like insert yourself in a way that you could not believe that you were, because directing comedy, I feel like it must be harder than directing drama in a way, because drama, you can always, everybody sort of agrees on what's sad, but people do not all agree on what's funny, right? So I just think there must be a tricky dance you're doing as a director of comedy, no?
Yeah, well, I think there definitely is a dance to it. I think, I mean, luckily when you're working with people at that caliber, they're bringing like so much to the table that it's, I mean, often it's small tweaks or ideas. So I didn't really, apart from maybe like needing to like do the, like pace a scene up or acknowledge that something isn't quite right with whether it's the blocking or like the way a moment is playing. With people like that, where it's that collaborative, I think it's as much about acknowledging and being honest about, because they're trusting you to come to them too and say, this moment doesn't feel quite right yet. Let's figure it out together. And it felt more collaborative like that. Or if something's happening that you think could be like funnier, you can sort of throw the idea out and say, what do you think about this? It's not like you go, like, I would not say it to Catherine or Eugene, you should go here and then there and say it that way. Let me give you a line reading, Catherine.
Yeah.
I don't think I would.
A little funnier.
Yeah. I wouldn't want it to be like that. And I don't think I'd be hanging around very long if I was.
Yeah. Did the fact that Schitt's did have this incredible ripple effect in the world, did it change what you're thinking about what you in your career want to put out into the world? Or had you always had that sense? Do you have a sense of what it is you want to put out in the world?
I mean, that's a very interesting question. It has definitely opened, like my instinct is often to do things that sort of explore some of the darker and the more complex side of things in that way. And that's a lot of the work that I've been sort of drawn to, working on this show and seeing the impact that it's had on people positively. I think part of me has always thought if you get into this like really complicated stuff, whether it's anti-heroes or like a complex theme or whatever it is, that will be something that people can resonate with and like experience emotionally and maybe see a different person's point of view, and that there's a good to that. But seeing a show like this that provides people with uncomplicated joy, not without substance, but that approaches it from that point of view as actually just being a beacon of light, and seeing how much people respond to that has definitely opened my eyes to that being like a wonderful thing. And I think especially in the world that we're living in right now, although I'm still developing things that maybe are a little bit more on the darker side, I'm very attracted to the idea of finding something that it just plays in the light.
Yeah, that's beautifully put. Okay, so last question. Why do you love what you do? Why do you want to keep doing this?
It goes beyond it's a compulsion. Once you're in this world, I think if you're destined to pursue it, there are days you like it, there are days that are frustrating, and none of it almost matters because you wouldn't ever choose to do anything else. So it's even a hard question to answer. But what I like is I live for the collaboration part of it. I love being developing friendships with the people I'm working with, or working with people I am friends with, and that coming up communally with story, with telling the world, with the process of that. If the process is done right, it can be a really sort of joyous and communal experience. I don't mean it in some weird culty way or anything, but I think that is what I sort of get the most excited about and you do sort of chase those moments on set where everything clicks, or in the edit or whatever, where you have your aha moment, or there's there are moments that just are sort of transcendent in that way, and you can live through a lot of the trench warfare side of it, chasing the next time everything clicks and you're like, this is it. It's a funny thing.
Yeah, it sounds like art. Sounds like an artistic experience. Fantastic. I am so thrilled for you. Congratulations on all your success. And I really can't wait to see what you do next. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk today.
It was my pleasure. Thanks for the conversation.
It was great. Thank you. And for those of you who haven't had a chance, as I said, or want to see it again, season 6 of Schitt's Creek is on CBC Gem right now. Thank you so much, Andrew. Take care.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye.